Hey everyone, and welcome to 2024 Ransomware Trends Report. Lessons learned from 1,200 victims and 3,600 cyber attacks. Today's webinar is sponsored by Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. Speaking of which, my name is Keith Ward. I am with that very company, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this special event today. But before we get there, we do have a few housekeeping items I need to let you know about. And the first one is that we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. That's also the place to let us know where you are today, where you're logging in from. We love to hear from you and know where in the world you are at this moment. So let us know all of that. Now, the Q&A panel is also the place to tell us about any technical issues you might be experiencing. So if you can't see something or hear something, give your browser a quick refresh. And then if that doesn't work, give it another refresh. Sometimes it takes a couple of refreshes. If that still doesn't work, let us know. We'll hop right on it. Okay, next, check out the handout section, which has a ton of important information for you. I'd especially like to call your attention to count them, four great resources from Veeam today. Take a look and download them now. You'll also see a link there to the ATM Decisions Group, which is a panel of IT decision makers that you can apply to join to participate in more in-depth events and other opportunities not available to mere mortals. There, you will also find a link to the ATM Event Center, which does have our calendar of more upcoming events just like this one. And finally, folks, after the presentation today, we are going to be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Now, you do have to be in attendance during the whole event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the details there. Hopefully I sounded like one of those radio guys reading all of that fine print stuff on ads that you need to get through. And with that, folks, let's get to the main event. Why don't we? It's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters from Veeam today. And they are Jason Buffington, the VP of Market Strategy, and Emily Tellez, Product Strategy Technologist. They are ready to go. So I am going to hand this virtual mic over to Jason.
To the global webinar unpacking the Ransomware Trends 2024 data. My name is Jason Buffington. I'm Vice President of Market Strategy here at Veeam. With me, easily one of the smartest folks I know at Veeam. I learn something every time that you and I share stage time. Em, welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Hello, everybody. Emily Tellez, Senior Technologist, part of the Product Strategy team here at Veeam.
So we want to do today, golly, it was just a few days ago that the Ransomware Trends 2024 report debuted at our global user event, Veeam On. And so we're going to use the next 55 and a half minutes to go through as much of the data as we can and hopefully give you some new things to talk about. That is, by the way, the primary goal of why we do this. So when we do this, all the data is unbiased. We use third-party firms to go and get the data for us, and we use it to affect product strategy, where Emily and I sit within the org. We use it certainly in some marketing activities and some sales enablement activities, but mostly we hope that it helps you have conversations between the backup teams, the IT ops teams, the security teams, the executives who are responsible, your partners, your contractors, your business stakeholders, et cetera. Hopefully this gives you something fresh to talk about. So with that in mind, let's kind of get into some of the data. And I'm going to go ahead and just unpack two pieces of data from the Data Protection Trends Report, which kind of inspires why do we want to double click and learn all this stuff about cyber. The first point, and we talk a lot about this, is organizations, again, unbiased IT leaders, IT implementers were asked how many ransomware attacks did they suffer in the preceding 12 months? And I think there's two boundary conditions, right? So I love the fact that ideally, hopefully up to 25% of folks responded in green. They believe they have not been hit. And I think believe is the right word here because sometimes they've been breached. The bad actor is still lurking around trying to find the exploits. The victim just doesn't know yet, right?
Yeah. Exactly, right? There is dwell time is very much so very real, right? So sometimes you don't know for days, weeks, months, on who has access into the system until that payload or that ransomware node has been found, right? So very important kind of takeaway there to think about is 25% believe that they had not experienced a ransomware event within the last 12 months.
Yeah, so best case, 1 out of 4 have not been hit. But I'm going to guess about half of them are wrong. And I say half because if average gestation is about 200 days, it's about half a year. So, but best case, 1 out of 4 have not been hit. 3 out of 4 have. And you can see on the chart that many of them have been hit more than once. We're going to spend some time talking about some of the causality for that later on. But I'm always intrigued by the red lines over on that far right side, those folks that got hit 4 or more times overall. And so I guess the first soundbite for us to unpack today, more organizations got hit quarterly than believe they didn't get hit at all. And I think that's endemic of where we are as an IT or society. All right, so one more data point just to kind of get us the context. So one of the questions from the Data Protection Trends Report was, what were all the things that caused IT outages over the last couple of years? Right, the blue lines are choose all that apply. The short lines was choose the one that was most impactful. For each of red was 2023, orange from 22, yellow for 21, etc. And unfortunately, we are here to tell you for the 4th year in a row, cyber events were the most common cause of outages and the source of the single most impactful outage of the year. Now, that's why we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about cyber. But Emily, one of the things that always kind of astounds me is there are some folks that, once upon a time used to be backup vendors, and now they say they're cyber vendors, right? And I think about it kind of like this. I'm an old school DR person, right? If you spend all your time worrying about floods, and so you are waterproof this and waterproof that, and you are protected against floods, and then you have a fire, there is no water around, because you've been protecting against one thing and completely left yourself exposed for something else. And so I think there's a danger to over-rotating to saying, I'm just going to protect against cyber, because what this data tells me, hard drives still die, apps still crash, data still deletes, users still do silly things, right? And oh, by the way, fire and flood and hurricanes still happen. Can I get an amen on that? What are you seeing out in the real world?
Tunnel vision is absolutely real, right? I mean, you're gonna try to react and try to prepare for whatever's the most recent, what's top of mind for all users, for all businesses. And unfortunately, a lot of the other items do fall to the wayside, and they can't, because more than likely one of those things is also going to have a failure. And even if we're to look at cyber in specific, right? I mean, it's not just one single thing that ends up giving bad actors access to your data, right? It's a multitude of things. It's not patching. It's not, utilizing the right permissions or credentials, things like that, right? That all lead to somebody having a bigger impact. So you got to be prepared for, fire, flood, blood, whatever may happen within that organization to be better prepared for data loss.
Yeah, so as much as we want to prepare for everything, and yes, your overall crisis management business continuity strategy needs to be inclusive of all these different kinds of IT disruptors that are out there. That said, we're going to spend our time today talking about ransomware. The 2024 ransomware research specifically does a couple things. One, most importantly, please take a look in that little golden box in the bottom of your screen. Not just Veeam customers. We didn't just go survey a Veeam customer panel to do this. We engaged third-party research firms. They ask an unbiased panel of folks, all of whom this year said that in 2023 they suffered at least one breach. Statistically speaking, because we have market share, some percentage of them are Veeam customers, but it's not a Veeam panel along the way. And that's really important, because not all the data that you're going to hear today is good data, right? Not all of it is good news. The other thing is that we specifically, no one person has enough knowledge to entirely prepare an organization to be protected against ransomware. So no one persona should only be the representation during the survey. In this case, we specifically surveyed a third of the folks were backup admins. At Veeam, we love backup admins, right? A third of them are security professionals, those folks tasked with prevention. And then a third of them were the executive stakeholders ultimately responsible for it. And we think that kind of hopefully gives us a more complete lens on what's really going on within these environments. Also, unfortunately, ransomware is an equal opportunity attacker. And so it can affect a small and mid-sized business just as easily as it can affect a large enterprise. And so certainly the representation in the survey needs to reflect that. So what we're going to cover for the rest of our hour is we're going to talk about 5 areas that were part of the Ransomware Trends 2024 report. We encourage you, go hit that QR code in the top of every corner. Go download the report yourself. We'll provide the URL at the end of the event as well. But we're going to look at how aligned and prepared was the organization, some details about the attack itself, what were the business impacts based on those attacks, how successful were the victims in recovering, and then nothing teaches like experience. And so what are some of the lessons learned that these 1,200 victims, again, on average, about 2.1 attacks per year, so representing about 2,600 attacks over calendar 2023, what did they learn? And more importantly, what can we learn from them? All right, so what I'd like to do, Em, is I'm going to power through a couple of the data points and kind of get us to a point where we're all looking at some of the same insights. And then I'd love to kind of hear what's the rest of the story that folks ought to be thinking about. How's that sound?
Perfect.
All right, so let's start with organizational alignment. You know, one of the common questions that we ask is, for many people, they might say that backup and DR and cyber resiliency are all part of one strategy. But how well aligned are the teams in actually facilitating that strategy? And unfortunately, 62% of respondents said that their team, just between the backup team and the cyber team, not even including all their other groups, right? Just between those two teams, 63% believe that they either need significant improvement or a complete overhaul just to get those two teams to work closer together again. Now, I got to confess, because we survey all these questions on the 3 different roles, it turns out the backup admin is the least happy with how well these teams are aligned, which probably implies that maybe they're not getting invited to the strategy part. Maybe they're not being included in the tabletops along that way. And so again, hopefully this helps you have some similar conversations. Anything quick you want to add on this, Em? Otherwise, let's start looking at what else happens outside of these two teams.
Yeah, no, let's jump right into that.
All right. So we've looked at the alignment between the teams. Turns out, by the way, if you look in the very bottom of this chart, only 6% of the victims did not pull in a third party on their worst day. Right. So when the bad act actually happens, for 94% of the organizations that experience cyber attacks, they picked one or more of these third parties and brought them in as part of how they try to remediate or survive from the attack. And I think it's interesting, so backup vendor is in there. Yes, we've got a whole team at Veeam that if you actually have an active ransomware attack, we'll want to help you and put extra team members on to help you resolve. Security vendors. It's interesting. There's some forensics experts coming in third. There's some ransomware negotiators on that. Emily, who do we know that does forensics and or ransom negotiation? There's a word for that. What is that word again?
that is Veeam, and that is Veeam powered by Coveware. So
Veeam Core. Yeah, so we brought on this group called Coveware just a few months ago, and that's what they do in order to help you have a more broad exposure. I also got to give props to the light blue line on here. I love that partners are part of this. You're going to need every hand on deck you can muster. And so someone having partners or service providers or system integrators who know your environment almost as well as you do can be a massive relief on your worst day along the way.
Yeah. And the quick bite I'm just going to throw in here, Jason, as well as, because again, every time we do these webinars, I learn something new. I talk to a different customer and I learn about what their ransomware response plan looks like. And if you're going to be involving all of these third parties during that remediation, it's very important to know how long does it take for them to get boots on site, right? Yep. So keep that in mind. If you're thinking about if we are going to be engaging our backup vendor, security specialist, law enforcement, ransom negotiator, if we need them on site in person, how long will it take us to reach them? So just one nugget of additional information to take away from here today.
Yeah, that's not the time to be dialing through a phone book to say who's available to help, right? You want to have pre-negotiated SLAs with these folks and say, look, you are part of our plan. You should be part of our prep. You should be part of our practice, and that way you're actually going to be useful on that final day. That's a great ad. Some of the other and speaking of prep and pre-planning what's going to go in there, that actually brings us into the other data point that we want to share for this. So organizations that were part of that were victims from this attack. So they were asked a couple things around: did you have a plan, a team pre-identified beforehand? Did the team have a plan? Right. And so if we look on the bottom of this chart, you will see only 2% of the victims did not already have a team pre-identified. Great. Right? Only 3% of the organizations did not already have a plan pre-prepared ahead of time. Fantastic. Right? So 95% of the victims had a team, had a plan. And admittedly, for the folks watching this, what I'm going to tell you is the fact that you have a team and that you have a plan, that's lovely news. That does not mean that you may not be more prepared than you think. So let's talk about, though, what actually is the most common things that those folks that have a team, that have a plan, what's in the plan. It turns out, and this is a little bit self-serving, but the data is what the data is. The most common things in an incident response playbook pre-identified was verifiably recoverable backups and assuredly clean backups, right? Now, one thing that was added this year, which I think is really interesting, that it bubbled in the number 3 slot, a plan for being able to recover to alternative infrastructure. There's a lot of other good things that are in it around communications and those kind of things. But I kind of like the fact, verifiably recoverable, assuredly clean, and a plan to recover someplace else than where the original metal was. What do you think?
Absolutely. There's a reason that our tagline was backup is your first as well as your last line of defense, right?
Yeah.
It has got to be something that we plan for. It is going to be one of the top 4 ways that you're going to be able to recover after an incident, right? A backup, a rebuild, or we're having to accept the data loss or pay a ransom. So those are some of the 4 ways that we see customers just trying to get out of an incident.
So with that in mind, one of the things we try to do to help along the way is if you're taking screenshots along the way, you're going to be able to download the report and some of the assets along the way. But there is a top 10 list. So I guess the first 2 top 10s we want to kind of lean in on is cyber resiliency starts in the conference room, right? It's about getting the teams to start being partnered better together again. And number 2, what do you need in your plan? Step 1, a good backup. Step 2, that you tested it. Step 3, ensure that it will survive. So you actually have something to recover from. And then step 4, make sure you have a place to recover to. With that in mind, again, aligning the teams is certainly a big part of that. We talked about step 1, but let's make this real for the kids at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where Veeam really does come in and shine, right? We are focused on helping to bridge that gap, align the teams to ensure that everybody has a strategy that's going to move them forward past that incident and make sure that, hey, we keep business, we keep lights on, we keep revenue going, and we have services to be able to offer. So with that, right, the Veeam data platform is that one main way that we're going to help customers to ensure that not only are they going to have business up and running, but they can ensure that they are maintaining security and staying compliant. So one of my top 3 favorite features, right, guaranteeing survival with 4 eyes admin protection. This is ensuring that those that have access into your data protection system can't go in there, make deletions or make changes without the second eyes of an administrator to be able to approve that. Next is enhancing our security and our compliance. So with 12.0, we introduced a way to be able to do what we call as a best practice analyzer. Well, that has been upgraded to include security and compliance. So being able to leverage infrastructure, go ahead and do those verification checks and ensure that, if there's anything that's missing in there, we can patch those. We can ensure that we're doing our due diligence to keep that environment secure and compliant. And finally, in here is putting the spotlight on malware. So being able to highlight any potential threats, identify missing SLAs, and be able to ensure that our environment is ready to go and ready to be leveraged in the event of a recovery, right, with Veeam Threat Center. So I'm going to walk through just a quick demo of all of these capabilities that you'll see as part of the Veeam data platform. So We'll go ahead and hit next, and we're going to just play through this. And first thing that we're going to see here is going to be that 4eyes authorization. So here underneath our users and roles, you can add in your secondary administrator. And once you add in your secondary admin, this is where you can go ahead and check a box to allow that 4eyes authorization to take place, right? And again, this is just approving that things like deletions or changes within the environment can't be done without the approval of that second admin. Next, we're going to look at some of the other ways that we can do some additional changes in here, right? So this is just going through that process of showing that secondary change of someone trying to do a deletion, and we're seeing that pending approval that pops up there. So without that, right, if we were to go ahead and reject those, we could see some of the details in it, but as you can see, nothing will change without a process or someone being able to make that approval. So next we have that security and compliance piece. So here, this is going to go ahead and scan through your backup infrastructure security. So we can see what are some changes that need to be made or adjusted within the environment. If we're not following a 3-2-1 backup strategy, if we're not leveraging immutability, those are going to be some things in here that are going to be highlighted for administrators to go through and actually fix. Now, if there's certain things within your environment that are going to be very specific, or you don't necessarily need to have that turned on, you can suppress those alerts and alarms, right? You could see those be available down there. And then on top of that, you can also schedule this to run. So you don't have to run this every single time ad hoc. You can actually come in, you can run a schedule, and then that way you have your best practices or your security and compliance analyzer that's going to be available to you whenever you need it. So there we see that schedule piece up here. And again, identifying the timeline for when you want that to be able to run. Also sending out an email once it does run as well, so your administrators get that notification. Finally, we're going to hop into Veeam Threat Center. So this is actually being pulled over from Veeam 1, which again, Veeam 1's proactive monitoring and reporting. It's pulling in all of that good data that we can be able to leverage to build effective data protection strategies. You have your data platform scorecard. You can see highlights of any malware detection that's been found within the backups. You can verify to make sure that your SLAs are meeting their compliance. And then you can also see if there's any RPO anomalies. You get a cool dashboard that highlights, your current infrastructure inventory. You can also see your heat maps for backup proxies, and even a quick jobs calendar to seeing when jobs are run. So all of this is available in Veeam Threat Center. And if you want to make your changes to those, you can do so directly through Veeam 1. And then this actually gets ported through not just backup and replication, but also Veeam Recovery Orchestrator as well.
That's awesome. Fantastic job. I love the dashboards. Our dashboards are getting so darn pretty.
Yeah,
all right,
absolutely.
So that's from a technology perspective, but there's more to what Veeam brings to the table than just the tech, isn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for one thing, right, we're completely involved in this comprehensive approach of how we can help users to better understand how they want to do recoveries and build data protection strategies. And when it comes to ransomware attacks, it's all about the technology that you're going to leverage, the people that are going to be involved, and the processes in order for you to get from A to Z. So we want to be able to protect organizations in every type of scenario. And so that's why we offer different things like, being able to offer up the SWAT team like Jason Buffington had mentioned earlier, right? Where we can help you through that ransomware incident to ensure that you're getting the most effective recovery strategy out there. But we also have a cyber secure program that I'm going to go into a little bit further in our next set of slides.
All right. So that's from an organizational perspective. Now let's kind of get back into the data from the ransomware report and take a look at, from the attack itself, how bad was it? So again, from the 1,200 organizations that suffered last year, here are three of what I call the super scary numbers. So the data on the left was asking the question, how bad was it, right? And on average, some were better, some were worse. On average, the victims said that 41% of their production data set was affected by the attack. 41%, right? And I use this analogy a lot, so let's round it down to 40. 2 out of 5, right? So 2 out of 5 of your hard drives, 2 out of 5 of your projects, 2 out of 5 of your databases, 2 out of 5 of your mailboxes, 2 out of 5 of your production data set affected by the attack. I try to make this a little more personal. I'm a proud dad of 3. 2 out of 5 of your kids' pictures when they were little, right? 2 out of 5 of your grandparents' pictures. Can't take those again, right? They are just lost. Now, that's the stat on the left. 2 out of 5 got hit or affected in some way, encrypted, shredded, deleted, whatever. The stat on the right, how much were you able to get back? And on average, a little over half, right? So 2 out of 5 of whatever went into the meat grinder. A little over half was able to be pulled back out again. Think about like you accidentally are putting the wrong document into a shredder and you realize, oh no, right? It's not quite halfway into the shredder. So you can pull it back out and you got a whole bunch of fringe on the bottom and half of what you used to have on the top. And so when you do some basic math, here's your next 2 top stats. Assume about 41%, some higher or lower, is going to get affected. If you can recover 57%, that means that you could not recover 43%, 43% loss of 41% affected. The kids at home should be counting on average, 18%. So basically a sixth of the production data set goes into the shredder and doesn't come back out at the end of the day. That's, as I said, super scary math.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you even boil it down to if that 18% happens to be your ERP or, very large healthcare environment, whatever it may be, right? That 18% could effectively shut down your entire business, regardless of the other percentage of data that you have access to, right?
Sure.
Very much so puts into terms what, that data loss can possibly affect from a business standpoint.
So what's the answer?
Well, our answer is not just early detection, but it's also going to be verifiable recovery, right? So obviously backup alone is it's not enough anymore, right? Especially when we're talking about a cyber threat, cyber incident. So we want to make sure that we're able to find problems before they start to, make themselves known in the environment. So we want to make sure that we have a reliable current backup, that it's viable, that we're testing, that we're verifying that that's going to be a way for us to recover. We want to have that proactive monitoring and analytics, full-time or real-time visibility within that environment itself, but then also being able to partner with our SIM tools, right? Leverage our other security vendors of choice to be able to bring in their expertise to be able to tell us, hey, we might see something that's possibly having some type of infection here or some type of event that you might want to go ahead and do some additional due diligence and checking out further, right? So rely on those expertise, have that experience that's going to be available, and then make it easy to use and make it scalable, right? Sure. The last thing we want to do is find out, midway through a deployment that this is not going to scale. So we're going to go into the next 3 portions of the Veeam data platform, right? So which is all about detect and identifying those cyber threats to minimize that devastation. And hopefully, maybe you get back more than 18% of that data, right? So number 1, early threat detection. This is something that Veeam has built in, but also we're going to be partnering with our third-party security vendors to be able to bring you, again, close that gap between our security teams and our backup teams. So this is AI-powered malware threat detection. It's actually being performed during the backup process. No, not post, not pre, but during the backup. Very unique to the market. Second is actually going into proactive threat hunting. So again, being able to take in those events, forward those events via syslog and pull them into different SIM tools of your choosing. We also have the integrations that are pre-built with ServiceNow. So that way, if IT teams do start to see some type of issues that are taking place, or they want to go ahead and do some pre-alerts, whatever it may be, they can run that data directly through ServiceNow and be able to create or close tickets directly through that platform. And then finally is getting that second opinion. Again, leveraging Veeam Incident API, which we actually partner with Progress Flowmon, as well as a few others that are going to be coming out here shortly. And this is the ability to go ahead and take those tools, take that report infection, flow it into the Veeam Incident API, and then go ahead and pinpoint exactly when do we have that infection take place, being able to trigger a backup automatically, so that way we can try to save as much data as possible. So we're going to go ahead and demo all of this. So let's go ahead and take a look first at the inline detection scanner. So you'll be able to go ahead and trigger the inline detection up on the top main menu tab. It's a checkbox to be able to enable inline entropy analysis, again, happening at the backup. You could choose your level of sensitivity. So if you want it to be lower or extreme, depending on what you want Veeam to be able to pick up, you have that opportunity to do so here. We also can go ahead and enable file system activity analysis. This is going to go ahead and detect any type of suspicious files, a deletion of a large number of files within your existing backups that could possibly determine a cyber incident that's taking place, right? So this is going to be where you can go ahead and you can trigger that to happen, as well as add any additional files or masks in here that you want Veeam to be able to search through. The incident API is a checkbox in here, so that way we can go ahead and trigger that backup to automatically be ran in the event that maybe we have some type of encryption happening on the production virtual machine itself. And then finally, just going ahead and allowing you to do some additional notifications. So we have a job here that actually has symptoms of some type of malware that's taking place. So what I'm going to first show you is just this first backup job that has ran successfully. And you can see in here, right, once it does its first run, you're going to have your baseline for what Veeam knows is it to be in a healthy state. And then once it creates that baseline, this is what it's going to be judging based off of the next incremental run. What has changed? Encryption, compression, different symptoms of possible malware. Now, this is an actual machine that was infected with malware, so you saw that there. And if we were to go and look inside of our option settings, this is where we can have that event forwarding be triggered for when we do identify that possible event. So I'm going to go ahead and I can plug in my syslog server, and then from here, that event for finding that possible malware activity or finding that possible event will go ahead and get forwarded over into the SIM tool of my choosing. Now, next, we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of the other items that you'll find available within Veeam Threat Center itself. So within Veeam 1, we can come into our data platform scorecard. Again, those malware detections, you could see the one item that we found there that was possibly had symptoms of malware. And here in my settings, I could come in and I can add in not just, again, the syslog for being able to track those events, but also you'll see that there's a nice little tab above syslog that shows for ServiceNow. And so we'll go ahead and we'll double click into that one now. So underneath my ServiceNow, if you want to go ahead and plug in your ServiceNow integrations, just go ahead and point to that service URL. And then here are any of those events that are being ticketed within Veeam 1. So Veeam 1 has a host of 500 plus alarms. Those alarms can also be forwarded directly into ServiceNow, creating tickets. So IT Ops has an opportunity to go ahead and act on any of those alarms being created and then be able to mitigate those as they see fit. So really great integrations that are coming forth from the Veeam team as well as our security SIM tools.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Emily.
Yeah.
All right. So far we've looked at organizational alignment. We've started to look into how bad it was. Now, of course, bad is in technology terms is about terabytes and petabytes and downtime. But most of that also almost always equates into business impact as well. So let's take a look at our third set of data. In this case, we're going to look at the money. Right. Certainly, there is a certain set of folks in every organization that at the end of the day, every outage is not about bytes, it's about dollars. So two of the stats that were captured in this year's survey, the first one, what you see on the left-hand side, I think a lot of folks incorrectly assume that the ransom itself, as big as it might be, actually is the largest portion of the business impact that an organization suffers during a ransomware type event. And on average, so what happened was the respondents, again, unbiased, 1,200 organizations, all victims in the last year, were asked how much was the ransom? And at the end of the day, when everything was done, and what was the overall financial impact? I just keep thinking about it kind of like, what's the alcohol portion of your dinner bill kind of thing, or the dessert, or, something along that. I guess it's getting close to 5 o'clock. Anyway, In this case, though, the data says the ransom itself is only about a third, 32% of the overall business impact that organizations have. But wait, we have insurance. Insurance will make everything better, except it doesn't. Right. So on the right hand side, when you get that final bill, this is what my final impact was. And then those victims then tried to send it to their insurance providers to get some kind of relief. On average, the victims were only able to get about 62% of their overall business impact back. I think about it kind of like this. Let's say that I have a car accident, right? So the car is disabled for a little bit of time, right? So yeah, it's going to cost me something to get the car fixed, but I'm an Uber driver. Right. So if I don't have a working car, that actually means that I'm not generating revenue above and beyond what the car itself is going to cost me. Or maybe I have to rent a car to fill that in. Well, now I'm hemorrhaging cash on the rental. I'm not making as much. But oh, by the way, I'm still going to have to pay to repair that car. And when everything is said and done, I take all those bills and I send them to my insurance agent, and I'm only going to get about 62 cents on the dollar back. And the rest of it, I just ate. So that's the insurance part of the money conversation. Now we talk about, okay, so 62%, and I gotta say the bad news is that number is probably only going to go down. When organizations were asked about what were the changes in their cyber insurance for their last renewal, 3 out of 4 folks saw their premium increased. About half of folks saw their deductible increased. About 1 in 7 saw their benefits decreased. Or maybe the other way to look at it, take a look at this little bitty wedge on the bottom. Only 6% of organizations saw no change. The other 94% saw the wrong things go up and the right things go down year over year. It seems like insurance is going to be less and less what we need to be relying on as our saving grace. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree on that. The insurance is not going to be your hero of the day, right? It's going to come down to everything else that you do to get your data back.
That's right. That's right. So here's your next takeaways. Again, screenshots are encouraged, right? So when you download the report, some of the things that we didn't get a chance to cover in today's talk is around the survey did ask not only what were the impacts to the organization during the attack and after, but also what were the impacts to the individuals that were involved. And again, if you're a backup admin, if you're a security admin, if you're a CISO, right, you have responsibilities along the way. Those are some hard days. Right, even harder than the disaster recovery days that Emily and I have spent many time talking organizations through. But it's going to affect you and your org, probably in that order. Other takeaways we already talked about. The ransom itself is actually a relatively small portion of the overall impact, which you will not get back from your insurance carriers. And then, unfortunately, as much as insurance is not helping you with everything that you'd like right now, chances are the costs are going to continue to rise and the benefits will continue to drop. So if we can't rely on insurance, then you better start relying on yourself. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, and you got to rely on different methodologies for recovery, right? So I think Jason and I, we spent a good plethora of this beginning just talking about how we want to be able to recover a full instance, a full image of a workload itself. But honestly, what we want to be looking at here as well is the possibility of having to recover even at a granular basis, right? So if I have a 60 terabyte file system and I need to be able to recover, XYZ amount of data, being able to do file level recovery, being able to do database level type of recovery is going to be pretty key here. On top of that, being able to leverage different types of data protection practices or policies. So not just relying on backups, but maybe we're leveraging things like continuous data protection. So replication between infrastructure and between sites, having that beam cloud mobility. So being able to take data sets from somewhere that was once on-prem and being able to leverage that within Azure, because the chances of me maybe not being able to recover back on-prem or back to the original hardware is very much so a real thing that can happen, right? So having that expertise, having that beam cloud mobility is going to be very crucial here. So with that, I think that leads perfectly into our next portion, which we're going to talk a lot about recovery.
Yeah. whatever reason, my screen just hung for just a second. My mouse not working. Oh, there we go. Everything caught up. All right. So yeah, so for recovery, if you're multitasking at all, I would just encourage you, take a screenshot of this, put down your mouse, close your mail. If there was one thing that I hope everyone takes away, and this is a survey stat that we test every year, then we do the research, because this probably describes the problem and the answer and what makes it hard all in one slide. Let's talk about it. So the questions that were asked here was, did you pay? And then by inference, did it work? Right now, there's a couple things in here we want to unpack. The first one being 4 out of 5 organizations paid the ransom. And, it's really easy to be on the outside and say, well, I wouldn't have paid. I would stand up against terrorism, right? Until all your systems are down and you're hemorrhaging cash, right? But 4 out of 5, whether they had a policy beforehand or not, whether they had a government that said don't do it or not, 4 out of 5 paid the ransom, according to this. Now, there's a couple nuances on here that's worth noting. About 4% didn't have an opportunity. There was no ransom asked. They came, they encrypted, they left, right? This was arson. This was about damage. I wish it was more, but only 15% of organizations said, no, we didn't pay. We simply restored ourselves. We're going to talk about what makes that hard and why more people don't get that 15%, probably because they're not using Veeam, but that's a different conversation. Anyway, 15% said, no, we did not pay. We just recovered on our own. But for the 81% that paid, that's the orange and the red, by the way, right side and then low left. I want to just kind of look at that red wedge for a second. So 27%, so it's 1 out of 4 overall. But I look at it differently. Of those that paid, 27 out of 81 actually turns out to be exactly 1/3. And in fact, if you're taking notes on this session, write this down because I don't know if it's in print anywhere else. 1 out of 3 organizations that paid still could not recover after, right? So imagine, Emily, you've gone to your boss's boss. We've had our bad day. For whatever reason, we've opted, we cannot restore. So the boss authorizes Bitcoin, you send it off, and you still can't recover, because that's the experience that 1 out of 3 victims has who pay the ransom, is that magic wand didn't work. Mm-hmm. Can you just kind of feel the that comes out of that moment?
Yeah, and I think, and it could be a multitude of reasons, right? I mean, I've heard stories of users saying, oh, well, they sent us the wrong key back.
Sure.
But then we hear stories of users saying, well, no, it wasn't the key. It was the type of strain of malware that they put in your environment. They didn't encrypt. They corrupt, right? They didn't take 60 terabytes of files and automatically compress those into 6 terabytes. No, they deleted, they erased, they got rid of all of that data, right? So even if you were to have paid, even if you were to have gotten that magic key or that magic wand, there was no way it was going to fix that corrupted data and get it back, right? And which is why it's so important, especially when we start looking at the options of paying a ransom, is having those conversations with those forensic experts that are going to be able to tell you whether or not if a bad actor or the type of malware that was deployed is going to be a viable option for you to go through a payment period, right? So, because sometimes I would say, and even Veeam with Covert, right, we have the expertise to be able to give that back to our customers to tell them whether or not, the impact of what they were hit with, who that bad actor was. These are going to be some of your options to get that data back. And for some, it's that option of it's not going to be viable.
Yep. Let's talk about a few of the top line options or challenges that actually happen that kind of causes some of these things to come out. So 2 more stats that I want to share with the kids. Actually, 3 more stats I want to share with the kids at home. The first one is, in 96% of the victims reported that the backup repository was targeted during the attack, right? And I make a joke about this. I don't have time for the whole joke, but the short answer is the bad actor wants to sell you their ability to get you back up and running again. And so they're going to remove your ability to save yourself, right? How are you going to save yourself? You're going to restore from your own backups, right? So in 96% of the time, they try to remove your ability to save yourself. And unfortunately, in 76% of cases, the bad actor did successfully affect the backup repository. In 3 out of 4, they removed your ability to save yourself. And Em, I'm just going to go on a limb. We're going to talk about technologies in a few minutes, but I'm just going to assume that a majority of the 20% where it was targeted, but they weren't able to take that out, I'm thinking that's immutability. Can we just get an amen on that one?
Immutable and air gapped, absolutely.
Absolutely. So, and you're going to have some homework on some of these questions along the way, but certainly 3 out of 4, they did not have the ability to save themselves, which is probably why, if I went back a slide, you'd see why this percentage is so low. All right. So, and in fact, as I recall from the incident recovery playbook, some of the top things were, did you have a confirmed recoverable backup, and was it survivable? This is how you get that survival. And unfortunately, 1 out of 5 said their backup survived and were ready to restore. One of the other parts in that incident response plan was the ability to recover to alternate infrastructure, right? And I had not seen this number before this year's survey results from our research panel company. But it turns out when organizations were asked, there's a myth in Hollywood, we're just going to wipe all the servers, we'll get that last good backup, we'll be fine. And that is only the experience for 1 out of 7 victims. In only 1 out of 7 cases was the victim able to wipe all their servers and then just start restoring over the top. For the other 6 out of 7, they were prohibited from immediately just wiping and starting to recover from their existing infrastructure. Maybe it was legal, maybe it was law enforcement, maybe it was forensics, maybe it was insurance, right? And we talked about the broken car analogy earlier. When I get a fender bender, I don't get to go start fixing my car right away. The insurance person has to come out and take pictures first, right? So whatever the case is, on average, of the 1,200 victims in this survey, 31% of their infrastructure was not available to be wiped. So unless you've got an extra 31% of extra metal sitting around, I don't know which metal you got, right? Then you're going to have to plan for your physical may have to go virtual. Your VMware might have to go Hyper-V. Your on-prem might have to go to a cloud. Your whole data center might need to go to DRaaS. But you need to plan to recover someplace else than where you started. And I think that's true almost all cases for DR. It's especially interesting that it's true in this case as well. Did that number surprise you?
Honestly, it didn't. I was expecting it to be in that same round or even higher, right? Because of just the conversations that I've had with customers and, their experience with an incident is, yeah, we weren't able to recover directly back because of XYZ, right? We have insurance, we have law enforcement, we have all of those that need to come in and do their due diligence. And then on top of that, right, maybe we didn't silo our environment the right way, or maybe because of who we are as part of an entity, right? We're government funded or we are part of the government. We had to take some additional steps to go and identify who the bad actors were and what type of data they might have had access to. So all of these play into reasons why you just can't expect to wipe and recover back to the original location. You have to have a plan in place. You have to have infrastructure, expertise, and know what that process is going to look like to get data back.
Yep. All right. Now, the last one of these stats, and again, I just think there's so much that's actionable in this series. But the last stat of this is, okay, we've talked about you may not be able to recover because you didn't have a backup anymore. Okay, we've talked about you may have to recover that to someplace else. The last hurdle in trying to recover is how quick can you recover? And unfortunately, on your worst day, when all your business processes are down and the press know about it and your employees know about it and your customers know about it and everything else is going wrong, you're going to have a whole bunch of really important people all saying, how quick can you get up? How fast can you get up? Why isn't it up yet? And that makes it prone for humans to try to round a corner. Hey, I'll fix that part later. I'm pretty sure this data is clean. Whatever that case is. And unfortunately, 63% of respondents did not have the ability to stage their restore where it goes into some kind of a sandbox or a quarantine and just check to make sure they're not reintroducing malware as part of their restoration process. Now, in fairness, this is not easy, right? Sandboxing, stage restore, automatically verifying it's clean, and then playing it forward. That is not a trivial set of engineering, unless you're using Veeam. But it's not easy. So that's one reason why a lot of folks don't do it. But I got to admit, when I saw that more people were getting hit 2 and 3 times, I'm thinking it's not because the bad actor got in 2 or 3 times. They got in at least once. And then you reinfected yourself, or you didn't patch yourself. And that's why you had to pay a second ransom or a third or a fourth. Is that plausible to you?
That is absolutely plausible. The containment and eradication phase of being able to get back up and running after an event has taken place cannot be rushed. Right. That is going to be your one period of time where you want to take everybody and slow down and go through the process to ensure that you are going to be recovering data back into a clean environment. Because again, I mean, the data doesn't lie. When you start to see more users getting hit quarterly versus those that not hit at all, absolutely means that there was some type of that containment that was rushed and they didn't clean all of it. And all they did was just reinfect their new clean environment. And guess what? Now they got access to the whole new sets of credentials. Now they might know where your backups live. Now they might know what your plan or your process or your response is going to look like. And they might be able to negotiate for a higher set of ransom, or even worse, get access to even more data, right? So that portion of the phase needs to be taken very, very seriously.
Yep. Now, just because you're taking it slow doesn't mean that you're doing it manually, right? So certainly there's a lot that you can do to orchestrate and to automate and to make that as fast as the computer will allow. Just don't short on the steps. With that in mind, here's the end of your top 10. So again, I just want to remind folks, this was a meaty section here, right? So more organizations paid but could not recover than those that recovered without paying. Number 9, back repositories are targeted by almost every bad actor in the attack, and unfortunately, more often than not, they are successful in removing your ability to save yourself. And then lastly, don't assume that you can use all your old gear, right? And now in some cases, that means you're going to have a pre-planned SLA to drop new gear. In some cases, you're going to have a secondary data center that has some offline gear so that it doesn't get infected as part of the attack. In other cases, plan for a cloud, right? Or more than one cloud in order to go across. By the way, lastly, as a bonus item, please do not reinfect yourself during the recovery process. All right, so we're going to talk about not using the old gear. We're going to talk about survivable infrastructure. Em, talk us through that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Data portability is key, and you want to have the most options available to you when it comes to recovering after a cyber incident, right? So this is where Veeam can definitely help out all of our customers, giving you access for instant recovery for critical workloads, recovery from storage snapshots, recovery from replicas, granular recovery for files, as well as databases and other applications, right? Your cyber forensics can possibly take days. It could take weeks. Your business has been already impacted, but Veeam can help, right, to ensure that when you're recovering clean data and you're recovering it the best way possible. So let's talk about some of those recovery methods. So if we're going to the Veeam data platform and we're going to look a little bit on the respond and recover faster from ransomware, let's talk about how you want to avoid that reinfection, right? We don't want to have that possible infection take place and be recovered back into our clean environment. So this is where Veeam can partner with your security team, partner with forensic investigations, identify who was the bad actor, what type of malware, what type of indicators of compromise they could have possibly utilized within your environment, and create YARA roles and do YARA content analysis on the backups to find any of those indicators and possibly remove those before you're recovering those back into your production environment. Next is going into enhanced automated clean recovery. So not only just doing that from a manual process, to Jason's point, right? But making this automated, making this repeatable, making it a process that you can test and you can verify over and over again to ensure that you're going to be able to recover the data how you want it cleanly and into the environment of your choosing, right? So perform orchestrated recovery into that environment, scanning with YARA, as well as scanning with an AV vendor of your choosing. And then finally is recovering with precision. So Veeam has multiple ways that we can do data protection, not just backups, but with replicas and with CDP-based replicas. So giving you an easy way to look at the IO that has been happening on those CDP replicas and give you a way to be able to roll back that data to the specific point in time and get that data back up and running. So let's walk through this inside of a demo. So first, let's go ahead and start with the Yara content analysis. So what you're going to see here is, again, I have some backups that have already ran. We also have some backups that have already been identified as having possible malware within them. And so here, what I'm going to be able to do is actually come in and highlight one of those machines itself. Now, when we hit one of those machines and it is not playing, you might want to hit play one more time, Jason. Cut that. There we go. So when we go ahead and highlight one of these machines itself, right, I can right click onto this machine and then I can come down, go ahead and hit scan backup. This is going to give you an ad hoc way to go ahead and scan this data, find the last clean restore point for this backup file, leverage the Yara rule that I have plugged in, be able to utilize that to identify any possible bad data within there. And then, like you see here, you have access to all of those Yara rules that have been implemented as part of Veeam backup and replication. You can set a range. So if there's a certain date or time period that we want to be able to scan back from, we can have that be issued here, or we could just have it scan through multiple iterations until it finds that next available clean recovery point for us to utilize. So really great enhancement that customers can be able to utilize with Veeam backup and replication. We can see that scan backup portion start to kick off, right? So it's going to go ahead and go through the process of scanning, looking for viruses. It's also going to be able to scan using the AV definition, which is something Veeam's been doing for quite some time now. If it finds that, you can see it gets highlighted here and it's being shown as possibly infected. If we want to go ahead and double click into it further, we can see that the detection source actually ended up being an antivirus scan. So the AV scan found it to be possibly infected. We're going to go ahead and pull that restore point and showcase to you that this is something you might not want to recover back into your environment. We want to ensure that it's going to be clean before we go ahead and leverage that for data recovery needs. Now, if we want to orchestrate this, we want to automate this and make it easier, right? We could just put this into our recovery plans. So in your recovery plan, we can go ahead and select the workloads that we want to go ahead and restore. We can choose where we want to recover that to, either to a new VMware environment or maybe even into Microsoft Azure. And then from here, we can actually check those malware flags, go through multiple iterations of those restore points to see which ones already have been identified for malware. So we'll just completely skip those from being processed and move on to finding the next one. Even being able to recover it and not even connect it to the network, pretty crucial there, right? So if we want to do some additional analysis checks or whatever that may be, we could do so here. The virus scan also being available, as well as Yara scan here. Now with Orchestrator, you can also pull in all of your Yara rules into a nice dashboard. So that could all be managed within Orchestrator and be pushed out for each one of your VBR servers, as well as you could check versions and ensure that you have the right ones that you want to utilize. Finally, here is just our continuous data protection policy. So I'm just going to show you how you can leverage that IO anomalizer to be able to see visually where might have that impact have taken place and be able to roll back that replica to the specific point in time based off of that.
Okay. There's a huge amount of power in this, but I will confess, I always get extra happy when we show Orchestrator. For those folks that are part of the Veeam community, I just try to get everyone who can listen just to hear me say, Orchestrator is what makes good on the promise of VBR, right? Everything that you want from the power and the reliability and the flexibility and the scalability and all the other things that VBR does, Orchestrator is what makes it really shine and makes good on the promise. So always love when we get to highlight some of the features from that. All right.
Absolutely.
Staying back in the cyberspace. Sorry, I get distracted. It's not just about the tech, right? And sometimes when you have high-powered tools, you need high-powered folks to help with that. Let's talk about the SWAT folks. What happens from a Veeam perspective? How do we jump in to help?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a dedicated support team that's here that's answering and taking calls from customers that if they think they've been impacted by ransomware, right, that they have that support team that's there that are the experts and can lead them through proper recovery, proper post-processing of ensuring that your recovery was effective, safe, and free from malware, right? So this is just some great statistics out there, right? 30-minute response SLA, so you can plan to put that into your incident response plans, right? And the average resolution time being 15 hours, which is incredible for customers looking to get data back up and running as quick as possible. And then, of course, we had to throw up some nice quotes from customers that have had experience with the SWAT team here.
It's an average resolution time is 15 hours. The unbiased data from the ransomware report actually shows more like 3, sometimes up to 4 weeks for resolution. So it's always great to hear that Veeam customers are getting a superior experience. I will also give a plug. My son actually works for a Veeam service provider, and he is actually helping customers through disasters, including cyber, almost every week. And it's just amazing to kind of listen to those teams do those things in the background. All right. One last thing. So we've talked a lot about what actually happened, what the impacts were, how they were able to recover, sometimes better than others, those kinds of things. Experience is the best teacher, right? And so we want to look at what did the respondents of the survey say moving forward. What are they doing? I think one of the keys that you and I would probably both agree on is the critical importance of survivable data, right? And so so that's going to come down to immutability, air gapping, offlining, whatever you want to call it, survivable data. And so this question was actually a forward-facing question by those same respondents. So this isn't what they were doing at the time they got hit, but it is what they're doing now. And so organizations were asked, how do you ensure a survivable copy of the data? And you can see top answer is actually hyperscale, right? So Amazon, Azure, little clouds that want to be Amazon or Azure, those kind of things. Certainly BAS and DRaaS providers comes in. I think it's fantastic that the top few options are cloudy. Right, but not to dismiss that. We see a lot of folks using storage arrays that have locking mechanisms. Object storage starts to come into play. Tape. It's hard to be more air gappable than taking a tape out of a drive, put it on a shelf, right? So, and when you collect these up, 85% of organizations are using at least one of the clouds that has an immutable capability. Haven't turned it on everywhere, but it's there. 75% of folks are using a disk that has an immutable capability. Haven't always turned it on, but it's there. But I think this slide alone kind of really leans us into, and I know that we're almost at time. We got about 4 minutes left, but to me, this is the epitome of why we tell not just 3, 2, 1, but add that other 1 and 0 to the end. Can you make sure that folks know what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. It's having that 3 different copies of data, 2 different media, 1 off-site, and ensuring that at least one of those copies is offline, air-gapped, or immutable, or even all 3. And then, of course, testing, right? Testing to verify that those backups are going to be viable. That's going to help to ensure that you're going to have no errors upon recovery. And honestly, this just comes down to Veeam focusing in on having multiple resiliency domains that we like to talk about, right? It's ensuring that that blast radius or the impact that you have from a cyber event doesn't get to everything within your infrastructure. Right. So having that broken down into different silos is really going to help you be better prepared and be able to defend better against that incident, and leveraging all of those capabilities, whether it's object locked, true air gapped, testing those through different protocols, as well as even ensuring that your data is encrypted at rest, right? I can't tell you how many times I've actually have seen users that forget to encrypt their data. Definitely want to make sure that you're always encrypting all of your data, regardless on where it sets. So, this is definitely key here for having an ultimate data resiliency strategy and being able to recover.
Okay, so we're almost done. One quick plug. Not everyone probably has heard about the Veeam Cyber Secure offer. Can you give us 30 seconds on that, and then we're going to wrap for our day?
Absolutely. It's full support for every stage during your actual incident response, right? So pre-incident, giving you quarterly security assessments, ensuring that you're doing everything that you need to do to be ready for any type of data loss event. during the incident. It's leveraging that SWAT team that we talked about earlier, ensuring that you have the best when it comes to an SLA to be able to work with those experts during your time of need. And then post-incident, I mean, I know we talked a little bit about insurance, but Veeam does offer an insurance policy. So that way, if you have been verified as having an attack, right, we're going to help to get you back a little bit more of that money that you might have lost during that outage.
Fantastic. All right. Again, the whole reason we do this, right? It helps us shape our strategy for the products. It helps us shape how we then deliver that and bring it to you, our community and ecosystem. Hopefully, it also helps you to have conversations with your peers, also with your partners and your service providers, on are you as prepared as you ought to be, and what could you do differently or better? And so I would just encourage everyone, please go download the report, hit that QR code, share with a couple of friends, share it on social media, right? Whatever you got to do in order to create some dialogue where you can be better prepared. Emily, as always, your record is still 100%. I learn something new every time we talk. Thanks for joining us on the session for today. If anyone has any questions for Emily or I or anyone else on the strategy team, you can reach out to strategicresearch@veeam.com, and we'll be happy to answer those questions for you. On behalf of Emily, myself, and Veeam, thanks for watching.
Okay, wow. Thank you so much, Jason and Emily. I always love hearing the results of the Ransomware Trends Report. It's one of the things that I truly look forward to each year, and this was another great one in the series. So thank you very much. Now, as they mentioned, you can reach out to them for follow-up. They do not have enough time for questions today, but Veeam will follow up, as they mentioned, on all the questions that you've asked, and you have asked a bunch of them too. So with that, folks, there's one more thing I need to do quickly because we are past time as it is, and that is to give away our Amazon gift card. As I mentioned up top, it's $250 for this webinar today, and we do have a winner, and the winner of that card is Jamie Neal from Kansas. Congratulations to you, Jamie. We will be in touch to get you your card, so sit tight. And with that, folks, we are wrapped. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Veeam for making this event possible. I want to thank you attendees for being here, for your great questions, and for joining us, spending part of your afternoon with us. It was a delight to be here with you. And that is a wrap for me today, and can't wait to see you in the next event, folks. Have a great rest of your day.